Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another very special edition of the show. We've got once again joining us from Gentlegiant, Mr. Derek Shulman. Happy to have you back.
Hi, Peter.
Good to see you.
My pleasure as well. Me too for you.
Yeah, I know, right? We've got some cool stuff to talk about. So just recently, I decided to put the shirt on. We've got the brand new reissue, the new remaster from Steven Wilson of what might be one of the top or most popular Gentlegiant albums of all time, Freehand. It's the album I generally point people to who maybe are new to the band's music. Where should I start? I'm like, well, I could start you on the really early stuff. I could start you on the real later stuff, but I think right in the middle of the pack of albums, this one for me always kind of represented everything you guys did. But it's easy on the ears for someone who's not yet familiar with your music, if that makes any sense at all. And while there are times where I have ranked other albums higher, this is right up there. And sometimes, especially listening to this a lot as I have been lately, this might be my favorite at times or really close to it. So maybe you could kind of, before we start talking about Steven Wilson and the remix and all that, maybe take us back a little bit to when you guys were putting this album together. I mean, what made this album so special for so many people? Because it has all the things you guys did really, really well, but I think it does it better than other albums, sort of.
Yeah, I think that, well, it was, I think the band was reaching its maturity, both writing-wise and on a live situation. And I think, and I believe you're right, actually, because it's an album that really shows the band in its best elements. And at the same time, I do remember both writing and recording it that we were happy. We were having fun. We were enjoying what we were doing. There was no sort of like bitterness or anger, or it was a very joyful album to make for lots of reasons. And at the same time, the band had reached a point in its live appearances where we were becoming pretty good headliners all over, certainly Europe and North America. We're playing to places of 15,000 to 20,000 people in certain places. So we were kind of like at a peak, and also the point about Freehand as an album was that we were also free of a couple of contractual obligations that it didn't stymie our creativity, but it stymied some of the the business activities of the band. And we were free from some of those things and had basically really our own vision in our own hands. So basically that encapsulated what this album was about.
And what's great about this album, musically speaking, it's really complex, as a good chunk of your catalog is. But there's this like aura of accessibility to much of the album that I think can't be denied. I mean, the first track just the same. I mean, it's so catchy, dun, 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 dun. I mean, it's so pleasing to listen to. You got those little jazzy bits. It's got this pop sheen to it, but it's so complicated rhythmically speaking. And you guys got all these interesting things going on there. And that's one of the reasons, and there's other tracks on this album that are like that, where it's got the Gentlegiant stamp, but if you are going to say to someone who normally doesn't listen to this thing called progressive rock or Gentlegiant at all, I would think specifically that first track could appeal to just about anybody.
Well, I wish it did, but but look, it's and we start off with the finger snaps and the sort of counterpoint of a guitar, across the board, making an interesting rhythmic intro to the song. But it rocks. That I think that's the key to I think the best of Gentle Giant, people, again, baggers in this, whatever this means, prog world. But honestly, we were a rock band. I mean, and I think this album rocks harder than most, than as much as Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath or God knows what else in its own way. And in that respect is probably accessible in its own right. Yes, there are pieces and parts of the songs and in music that are, I don't know if it's complicated, but just Gentle Giant. We were just doing again what we wanted to do. Yeah. I mean, I'll almost repeat a lyric, but and it was just something that we did for ourselves. But we rocked, and John, and Ray, as a rhythm section on this album, and with other instruments, of course. I think it's a great rock album. I mean, prog, yeah, okay, we got bits and pieces that you have to listen to. Yeah, are there time changes? Probably. Are there bits and pieces that you really should focus on? I don't know. I mean, but it rocks, and I like that. Again, I think that accessibility. I don't know what I don't know what accessibility. We didn't know what accessibility was,
right,
when in those days. But I certainly, having heard it and listened to it again recently, because of the Stevens remix, I don't see why it wouldn't have been. But in those days, things were things were starting to change, and even bands in our quote world, the yeses and yeses and crimsons. And everything, everyone else were starting to think, we haven't got a hit record yet. So how do you get bigger than selling X amount rather than Y amount that other bands are doing? So it was accessible to our fan base and beyond, but certainly not a mass appeal access, if you like.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the bands, like you mentioned, hit singles were not necessarily the norm, right? You had, Yes had Roundabout and Seen All Good People. ELP had Lucky Man, and there were a couple others here and there. But for the most part, hit singles not normally associated with this style of music. And it's interesting how you bring up the whole rock aspect specifically of this album. I remember and we're going back 30 years plus now, I remember first investigating this band. And I remember, when we're talking, because I got into Gentle Giant a little later. I was a hard rock and metal guy in the late 70s and through most of the 80s. But in the beginning of the 90s was when I really, really started to dive deep into this thing called prog rock. And I remember the internet had just happened, right? It's hard to think about. The internet just started, right? But I remember doing some investigative work and reading up about Gentle Giant, because I always loved British bands. And this name I had always heard, but never really investigated. And I remember reading, I don't remember who the writer was or what the website was, but someone said that Gentle Giant was probably the heaviest of all the classic British progressive rock bands. And I remember first picking up Three Friends and Octopus and Acquiring the Taste and, a few others. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know about heavy, but they definitely do rock in spots. But all these years later, I get where he was coming from, because even though we're not talking big behemoth Black Sabbath heavy riffing type stuff, but the music itself, the complexities and the attack of it all is pretty heavy. And I'd say heavier than anything Genesis ever did, or Yes, or ELP. Again, not that that's what you guys were striving for, but I think the impact of the music and just the expert way of putting together all the arrangements give that sense of heaviness, even though, Gary was not always, laying down these big heavy riffs, but the way you guys all played together, and it all, maybe not initially when you first listen to the music, but after a while, it all makes perfect sense. So, so I can totally see that now, and I appreciate. And yeah, this album does rock quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, John, having joined the band, for the Octopus period, and then beyond in a Glass House, Power and the Glory. I mean, the whole band was really, playing at its peak for both recording wise and live wise, and yeah, we rocked. I mean, we did. We didn't, one thing, and having, worked and been on the road with some of the bands you're talking about, we didn't go on stage and pretend we were the LSO or the Royal Philharmonic. We went on stage to rock and have a good time and enjoy ourselves and enjoy what we were doing and have the people in the audience have a good time and smile and enjoy what we were doing. Again, we didn't look down and start playing the mellotron for 5, 6, 7 minutes and pretend we were an orchestra. We were rocking, man. I mean, we never had longer periods of 2 or 3 minutes doing the same thing, unless it was a solo, a vibraphone solo or a violin solo. And that we didn't milk we didn't milk that stuff. We just enjoyed, having a fun time on stage. But behind that fun time was John Weathers, an incredible drummer, just rocking so damn hard again, his playing was damn complicated, but complicated in a very simple fashion.
Yeah.
So that I could it's weird for me to analyze, be objective about something which is subjective, but certainly we were a rock band, and on stage, I think we rocked harder than the bands you mentioned by far. I mean, having been on stage with Yes and Genesis and Crimson, we rocked harder and we were a lot louder. So we had fun. We smiled as well, and we enjoyed ourselves. Whereas
good.
Whereas a couple of the other bands were kind of a little more, how can I put this? Serious. I won't say pretentious, because that's not the word. That's the word we use for ourselves.
So how did you guys avoid? So all these other bands we've been talking about, every album's got like this big 20-minute long epic or whatever, and you guys were not all about that. Was that like was that the intent, or it just, when you were writing songs, there just never felt like a need? Because it's funny, because looking back on the catalog, I don't miss the big, long Supper's Ready, Close to the Edge epics from Gentle Giant. But I mean, you had some longer songs, but for you guys, 10 minutes, that was epic enough, I think. Is that something you just never wanted to get into because everybody else was doing it?
No, it was, we didn't even think about other bands and what they did and what they didn't do on recordings or live. We just did what we did. I think probably we were probably bored. Our boredom and ADD stopped us getting into big long pieces of music that really didn't mean much. What we wanted to do was enjoy and surprise. The element of surprise and fun and shock was something that we loved. And so doing long pieces of music that didn't say much didn't interest us at all. I mean, okay, 2 or 3 minutes of a riff or something on top of it, okay, and then perhaps boredom or something else that the Kerry O'Ray said, no, we're going to stop now because it's like this is getting old, or myself would say that, stopped us getting into these long pieces of music that really didn't say much more than you were putting stuff down on tape in those days that was inconsequential. Yeah. We love surprise as well. I mean, we love to surprise ourselves and surprise an audience. So they didn't sit in their chair and sort of fall asleep. We wanted to make them stay awake and be aware that we were finishing a show, whatever that was.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of like keeping people on their toes and surprising the listener. So how does a group of guys come up with something like On Reflection?
Well, that was scored. I mean, no, that was Kerry. I mean, Kerry is an incredible composer. I mean, really undersung. I mean, if Hattie, after Gentle, I wanted him to go out there and compose for symphonic music because he's an incredible composer. So he put this together, scored the music for us to sing, and we saw our parts and put it together. And lyrically, I had to sort of intertwine the various pieces so that we all came together at a certain point, and we put it down. I mean, it was
it's brilliant.
It was, yeah, it's pretty damn good.
Come on, you can say it. It's brilliant.
No, it is pretty good. I admit it, but it's well done and it's clever. And I tip my hat to Kerry for putting this piece of music together and making it what it was, because it wasn't, again, singing it and having the other guys sing it alongside with me. This is a 4-part piece of music that is quite hard to mesh into each other. But yeah, it was fun to do, again, Kerry's compositional ways are superb. I mean, he was and continues to be, actually. Unfortunately, he hasn't, for some reason, continued to be the composer, literally, classical composer that he could be and should have been.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't remember like the first time I ever heard that song, because it's been a long time, right? And I got the olds. My memory's not as good as it used to be, I guess. It was a long time ago. But when this first came out, I don't know, I was searching YouTube or something like that for whatever, and I stumbled, and maybe you saw this, and I don't normally watch reaction videos because I don't really find them all that honest, to be honest. But I stumbled upon this guy who's got a decent following. He's got a YouTube channel. He's a classical composer, and he's doing these reaction videos on prog rock albums and some metal stuff and whatever. And when this first came out, he did a reaction video, and he played the entire thing on the video, and he gave his reaction to each song. And I found myself fascinated, specifically when he was playing on Reflection. This is a guy well-versed in music. He's a classical composer. And to see the actual delight in his face of hearing that track for the first time ever. And that was pretty wild, because I would think if you are someone who appreciates and understands music and the complexity of music, or the art of putting together and composing music, to hear on Reflection for the first time must be a pretty amazing thing. And I was watching him and looking at the smile on his face and seeing the wheels turn, right, on how you guys did all this, and what the notes were and how the whole counterpoint worked. And I wish I could go back in time to the first time I played this album and I heard that song. I've seen a couple of reaction videos, but the thing about on Reflection, and a lot of our music is, I mean, it's a mixture of all sorts of our own influences, if you like, but certainly the songs. It's weird to call them songs. The pieces of music, if you like, have themes, and the musical themes are reflected when we go to another part. You'll hear the bass play the theme, and or the guitar and the vocals become a part of the theme of the music, rather than a chordal pattern and a vocal on top and the verse, B section, chorus. You'll hear the themes of the songs in a different fashion, played on a different instrument, and that's pretty. It's a classical way of composing effectively. But the title track is a perfect example of that, right? I mean, starts off with that kind of riff in the beginning. It's kind of like a hard rocking tune, and then you got all those changes and all these like real kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Cunning ways of that bringing out back to the main riff, and the whole song is just kind of taking you on this journey. And at no point in time is the listener, and again, I'm going from a perspective of hearing it for the first time, you never know what's coming around the corner next. And it could be 10 seconds from now, or 30 seconds from now, or a minute from now. And you revisit themes, but you don't beat them to death. I mean, that's great songwriting.
Well, it's not the usual way that Britney Spears would have her songs written, if you like. But if you being well versed in music, I mean, you'll hear that the songs that you'll hear in the song, and freehand or just the same or whatever, the various instruments, and with a remix, of course, they're clearer. That theme of the song or the theme of freehand, is in there in most parts of the music. It'll come up very quietly and subtly in different parts of whether, as I said, it's a guitar lick or a violin, whatever it is. I can't remember what even played on that, but whatever it is, a keyboard thing. But it'll be there, and then we all come together and put it out there again. So it's something that I guess that was Kerry's influence, and probably Ray's as well. But we have all different influences as a band, as you well know. So we all enjoyed doing this and making it work as something that was Gentle Giant. I mean, we didn't try to be or look for anyone else or any other band to sound like. That's something that, in certain respects, I think set us apart in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but it's funny though, like looking at most of your albums, there are those tracks like the ones we've talked about that are very challenging, very expertly put together. But usually on every album you have kind of a more kind of haunting atmospheric track. Like on this album you have His Last Voyage, which is kind of that, which is nice because it breaks up the album. And then you have Time to Kill, which is more of like an up-tempo rocker, right? Mobile. I'm trying to say it like you guys would. I like the way you guys pronounce it better than we do.
Mobile. Okay.
Yeah, mobile sounds so much better than mobile, right? Taliban. I mean, there's just some really nice variety on this album, and I think that's another reason why I think this album works so well, and why I would never say to a Gentle Giant newbie, go listen to Acquiring the Taste first, right? As great as that is, and it is, this I think offers more different elements for someone who's just looking to get into your music, I think.
I think, as I said earlier, I think it's the band coming to a maturity that as a 5-piece. I mean, originally, Phil was in the band, my brother, in the first 4 albums actually, and that added some mixture of other elements, but certainly as a 5-piece, I think that we found ourselves really at our best during that period of time. That's from Power and the Glory, even in a Glass House, which is a strange album, but certainly that was a maturation of what the band. I keep using the same word, but that's all I can say, because I remember making the album and recording it and then going on tour with it, and we were in a good space. I mean, we were rocking. We were happening then.
Yeah. Did you guys ever feel, though, not specifically this album or any album, did you guys ever get finished with an album and look at yourself and say, how the hell are we going to pull this off live? And obviously you did, because I've heard a ton of live stuff from you guys, and man, spot on. Was that ever a challenge? Did it make the rehearsals a little bit more grueling to try and get this stuff down to be ready to go out, play it night after night?
No, you know what? The live situation was always different to the recording situation. I've said this before, and I'm probably repeating myself with you, but the recording was a kind of a sketch of what was going to be the painting on stage. So whatever was recorded, just to almost, if you like, replicate what you can hear on a record. Why would you do that? Try to play to an audience to entertain them. So we'd integrate different kinds of things on stage, both musically and also visually, that would again make an audience smile, surprise, and shock. We we stop the music and do a drum bash or a recorder of a quartet or whatever. No, it was when we took this album, if you like, and promoted it as a live item, we changed the things around so so that the audience, they weren't waiting for the new song of Just the Same or whatever. We'd throw other things in there so that the audience would be surprised and wake them up, and you're not going to fall asleep on Gentle Giant. That's for damn sure. I'm sorry. You're going to stay awake, no matter what, whether you boo or cheer.
Yep. No 5-minute long Mellotron droning going on in your music, right?
Absolutely not. No.
So, all right. I my intention was not to get into almost a track by track synopsis, but I love hearing your, your stories about these songs. But so how did, what was this, obviously you guys have worked with Steven Wilson before, but there are obviously other albums in the catalog that he has not worked on. What were the steps to get him to do this one? I mean, when did that all start?
It actually started last year. I mean, we had during the pandemic. I mean, it's still, but Steven had, time on his hands. Ray, my brother, works with him on different other 5.1 mixes with him. I mean, he's worked with him on his own albums.
Yeah.
And he said, "Do you mind if I have a shot at freehand and interview and the missing piece?" And so we said, "Sure, go ahead." I mean, Steven is very, very. He's a fan, and he's also very respectful about what we actually put down. And I think there's not been a time, maybe once or twice when in the past that he's brought something to the band and we said this is not what we expected. Pretty much he's very respectful of what we put down and just giving it some air and giving some clarity so that you could hear some of the pieces a little more clearly. And with the Atmos mix is superb. I mean, if anyone has Atmos, but you can actually hear, as I said, the instrumentation much more clearly, and that's when you could hear the thematic parts of these various songs much clearer. So he didn't put his I'm Steven Wilson mark on the album.
Right.
He just made it a little more airy and give the various instruments more space, and I think it sounds better. I mean, had we had time or the opportunity or even the technology at those times, we would have probably tried to do the very same thing. Yeah. So so we put this out, and next up he's done his interview and the missing piece, and then we're thinking about the live album. Let's see if
that would be nice. Yeah,
have a shot at that, and we even Civilian, which we just got back as a catalog item, which the Giant for a Day I'm not sure about, but I'll leave that in abeyance.
So how about In a Glass House, or is that a little bit more tricky with as far as
no, this is In a Glass House was the first album that Steven came several years ago and said, I'd love to remix that album. He said, well, we'd love you to too, but we don't have the multis. And for whatever reason, we've looked for the multi-tracks everywhere. I think they've been either destroyed, gone, stolen, or whatever. The other albums we had, but except for the Acquiring the Taste and Three Friends, we have the multis of the others. But if anyone out there has any idea where the multi-tracks of In a Glass House is or was or were, we'd love to hear that, because that's an album we'd love to get Steven involved in and ourselves involved in, because it was a milestone in the band's career. Yeah.
So there's always, whenever Steven works on any of these classic albums, there's always a lot of interest, both positive and even some negative stuff. So you and I sat down in your offices in New York City. Geez, Derek, it's got to be like 15 years ago when the DRT remasters all came out, and a lot of people bought those. They already had the Terrapin Truckin' releases. They had the original. So now here we are again, and now we've got additional remixes and remasters and all that sort of stuff. So what would you say to someone who's been listening to Gentle Giant for a long time and has bought these albums many, many times? Would you give your 2 thumbs up to say you absolutely need to check these out because boom?
Okay, because Steven is a fantastic producer and engineer, and really understands the band musically. And musically meaning that all the parts of the songs, the music, the vocals, the lyrics, the different instrumentations are important to him and important to the band. And he clarifies each part much more than any of the other releases that you're talking about had come out. They were remasters. They weren't remixed. And this is remixed, and remixed in a fashion that you can actually hear the clarity of the clavinet, of the clarity of the guitars, of the vibraphone, and violins, etc. And they're very, very, very much and there's space in between all these. It's hard to elaborate vocally about what it sounds like, but there's space in between the instrumentation that has not been on our first album when we did it ourselves, and the subsequent remasters. So it's aficionados kind of release, but I like it much better than the other ones you're talking about.
Well, I would agree. And for me, he's got a pretty good track record now. I've loved all the Jethro Tull releases he's worked on, the Emerson, Lake and Palmer's, certainly the King Crimson ones. I haven't heard enough of the Yes ones, but I'm ready for more. So Interview is next. Do you know what time frame that'll be released?
Probably towards the end of the year.
So this year. Wow. Okay, great.
Yeah. We'll see. Probably towards the end of the year, and Missing Piece, so that'll be next year. But this is just fun for us to be involved in having a new audience, if you like. And that's the interesting thing for me as well, that the internet, good and bad as it is, for the most part, 60% bad and 40% good, has opened a new gateway for an audience that would not know about the band I was in 41 years ago. And the fact that we're talking about it, says a lot as well. I mean, I guess it stands at, I guess what's good about it is it stands the test of time. I guess it's, and that's, when we were recording, we never thought, God, in 41 years' time, I hope I'm still talking about it. It was like, okay, let's get on the road, and Dan will, get our act together and make some money and pay the rent. Yeah. 40 years later, there's still interest, and probably now a lot more than there used to be.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre for me, but it's interesting. It's and again, the social media world and the Instagram world and all that stuff has been open armed to the band, and probably other bands of our own too. Yeah. For a new audience.
Yep. See, it was amazing. Kind of an extension of that is when you guys did last year, the fans, I should say, did the Proclamation fan video where you guys appeared in briefly. That was a huge hit. I mean, you guys, I was so happy you guys appeared on the Sea of Tranquility Fall Fest program. Right, and that was the hit of the whole program. And even though the song had already been released prior, for all those people who hadn't seen it, to have it featured on our show was amazing. And that's all anybody could talk about. Have there been any discussions to maybe do something similar with another song? I memean, I'm sure the musicians who took part in it would love to do that.
Yeah, of course. But, that was my son, Noah. He was born after I was in a band. I was working in the other, I went to the dark side of the business, as you well know.
Yep.
And he's seen all these videos and all these, and he said, he works for Sony in the legacy department. He does videos and he does all this social media marketing for bands of our age, my age, and younger and older. He works with Pink Floyd and Ozzy Osbourne, and he has to tell them, no, you got all those platinum records on the wall, but there's a whole world out there that don't know you and what you were. Anyway, he was the one that put it together, and poor Ray, my brother, had about 102 audio tracks to mix to make this proclamation video. But it was actually quite joyful to see, because it was during a period of everyone was like really depressed about being locked in and everything. But there was talk about it. But honestly, in the same, it's going to sound bizarre, in the same way that Gentle Giant won't get together again, you can't replicate something that's already been. You've done something which is really, really important, and if you try to follow it up with something which is just as good, it'll be compared to that. And so no, that was it. Okay. That was a statement, and we made the statement, and Noah and Ray put together something, and the fans, of course, put together something very special. But to replicate it again, it's like, why do that? Just leave it there.
Fair enough. It was great for what it was, right? So
and and it was great for what it was. I whenever I see, I'm not sitting there like Sunset Boulevard looking at it every 5 minutes. But when I see it, it's really, really well done, and the fans who are playing and how it's put together it's quite joyful.
Yeah, well, I think that's what made it so enjoyable for everybody. So for someone like me, who's been a fan for so long, to see other fans who love the music as much as I do, but they could actually go and replicate, all the different lines and melodies and things like that, and see you guys pop up in there, it was pretty special. I mean, considering, how long you guys have been away, even just to see you for a brief couple of seconds in there, along with all of these loyal fans who have gone to learn these songs. I mean, that's pretty good. And I think it speaks to the testament and the legacy of your music. I mean, you just said it before, who would have thought all these years later that the demand for Gentle Giant music and things Gentle Giant and the interest in the band is still going stronger than ever. And that tells you something.
Yeah, I'm very happy that, and happy that in that video and subsequently about other things, is that it's a new audience. It's an audience which could be my grandchildren, if you like. I'm saying that in a funny way, but it's true. And the fact is that there's new musicians who are discovering, not just us. I mean, bands like Crimson and Tull, et cetera, and I think it's fantastic. It's great that it's not just TikTok and 5 seconds of silly stuff on a video. Yeah. There are people out there still that want to play and play well, and see bands that did try to play well back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Yep. Well, how about when the interview comes out, we have you come back on and talk a little bit about that album? Does that sound good?
I'd be happy to, man.
There you go. So would I. So cool. So in the meantime, everybody, if you haven't gotten your Steven Wilson remix of Freehand, it comes in various different forms. I've got the CD and the Blu-ray package.
Yeah, the Blu-ray is great. I mean,
it's amazing. It's amazing.
The animations are fantastic on that one.
Absolutely well done. But there's other bigger sets, and you've got LPs and all that sort of thing.
Right.
So and that's available right now on a la carte music. So go check it out. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Always a pleasure talking to Derek Shulman from Gentle Giant. Like I said, we hope to have him back when the next installment comes out, which should be interviews. So stay tuned for that. For Derek Shulman, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one.